My name is Emily Harris, and the night my father threw me out for being pregnant, I stood on the porch with nothing but a suitcase and a heartbeat inside me. They called me a disgrace. But what they didn't know is that one day, I'd walk back through their door not begging, but triumphant. And they'd choke on the shame they tried to bury me with. Before we begin, where in the world are you watching from? Tell me in the comments. And if you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, you'll want to hear every word of this. I always thought the worst part of breaking bad news would be the reaction. The yelling, the accusations, the fallout. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepares you for the silence. That unbearable moment after you speak when the world just stops. And you know in your gut, nothing will ever be the same. It happened in our cramped kitchen on a sticky August evening in Tulsa. The air was thick with fried onions and the kind of tension that hums beneath a family trying too hard to look like one. I hadn't meant to blurt it out. I wanted to wait until after dinner. Maybe tomorrow, maybe never. But the words clawed their way up my throat. "I'm pregnant," I said, my voice cracking under its own weight. "With twins." My mother, a woman who had made casseroles for every church potluck since 1995, dropped the ceramic plate she was drying. It shattered like a gunshot, and then stillness. No one moved, no one breathed. My father's knuckles turned white around his fork. I waited for him to ask if I was okay, if I was scared, if I needed help. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed in disgust, and asked, "He left you, didn't he?" I wanted to lie, to protect what little dignity I had left, but I couldn't. "Yes," I whispered. "Ethan's gone." A low, bitter chuckle escaped him. "Of course he is." My mother finally spoke, her voice a hiss. "You're not married. You've brought shame into this house." I tried to hold her gaze, but she wouldn't even look at me. Her eyes were on the floor, on the broken pieces of her plate, like that was the real tragedy here. "I didn't ask for this," I said, my hands trembling. "But I'm keeping them. I have to." My father stood. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. He just walked past me to the hallway closet, pulled out my old suitcase, and began dragging it down the hall like this was a routine chore, like taking out the trash. "Dad," I followed him, helpless, pathetic. "Please, I'm still your daughter." He didn't answer, just zipped the suitcase closed and shoved it at my feet. My mom stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed like a judge delivering a sentence. "You've made your choice, Emily. Now live with it somewhere else." That was it. No fight. No last-minute hug. No, "we'll figure it out." Just the sound of a zipper and a door slamming shut behind me. I didn't even make it off the porch before the tears came. I collapsed onto the front steps with my suitcase in my lap, the cicadas buzzing loud in the humid night. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to rewind time and make Ethan stay, or make myself smarter, or braver, or less naive. But mostly, I just wanted to not feel so disposable. Cars passed, strangers walked their dogs, and my parents turned off the porch light like I never existed. What do you do when your entire world narrows to one packed suitcase and a baby, or two, on the way? You find someone who'll open the door, even if it's just a crack. It was nearly midnight when I stepped off the city bus, clutching my suitcase with one hand and my stomach with the other. Tulsa looked different from the curb. Bigger, colder, like the whole city knew what I'd done. I stood in front of the old apartment complex, heart racing, breath fogging in the warm air. I hadn't even called ahead. Just sent one panicked text. "Jess, they kicked me out." She didn't reply. But 10 minutes later, her porch light clicked on. Now, standing at the threshold, my hand hovered near the buzzer. I didn't have the energy to explain myself again. I had nothing left but the clothes on my back and 2 tiny heartbeats growing inside me. Before I could press the button, the door creaked open. Jessica stood there, barefoot, wrapped in a threadbare hoodie, her red hair messy from sleep. She took one look at me and pulled me into her arms. No questions, no judgment, just warmth. "I was hoping that text was a mistake," she murmured into my hair. I choked back a sob. "I'm so sorry, I didn't know where else to go." She pulled back and looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Emily, you're my best friend, of course you come here." Her apartment was as tiny as I remembered. 1 bedroom, 1 bath, the kind of place that creaks when you breathe too loud. But it was safe. It smelled like lavender and takeout, and the couch had just enough space for someone whose life had been reduced to a suitcase and a secret she could no longer hide. Jessica brought me a glass of water and a blanket, then curled up on the arm of the couch. "Tell me everything." I hesitated, then opened the dam. The twins. Ethan walking out when I told him. My parents discussed, my father dragging my suitcase through the hallway like it was a dead weight. She didn't interrupt, just listened. Sometimes that's all you need, someone to bear witness. When I finally stopped talking, the silence was heavy but not empty. She took my hand. "Em, you're not alone in this. You hear me? We'll figure it out." The words nearly broke me, because they weren't pity, they were a promise. "I have nothing," I whispered. "No job, no money, no plan. I don't even know where to start." Jessica shrugged, her expression soft but fierce. "Then we start right here, with a couch and a cradle and me." I couldn't stop the tears, I tried, but they came anyway. For the first time since everything fell apart, they weren't from fear. They were from relief. That night, I curled up under a blanket with her extra pillow, the weight of 2 lives pressing gently against my ribs. The rain started around 2 a.m., soft and rhythmic against the window pane. And somewhere in the quiet, in the hum of the old fridge and the rustle of the wind, I made a silent vow. I would not raise my daughters in shame. I would not let the people who discarded me define the story I was going to write. Maybe I didn't know how yet, but I would find a way to build a life that was mine, and when the time came, they would see me again. And it wouldn't be with a suitcase. It would be with success. The first night on Jessica's couch, I didn't sleep. Not really. Even with the soft buzz of her ancient window AC and the gentle tap of rain on the glass, my brain wouldn't stop spinning. I stared at the ceiling, hands resting on the small swell of my stomach. The room was dim, shadows flickering from the street lamp outside, and for a moment I forgot where I was. I wasn't in her apartment anymore. I was in the sun-drenched hallway of my old college dorm, back when love still felt like a warm secret I was lucky enough to keep. That's where I met Ethan. He had this boyish smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We sat next to each other in Intro to Sociology and ended up talking for 4 hours in the library the same afternoon. He brought me sunflowers on our second date. "I Googled it," he'd grinned, holding out the too large bouquet. "They mean loyalty." I'd believed him. I'd believed a lot of things. He used to trace circles on my arm and whisper, "We're forever, Em." I'd never heard a lie sound so much like a lullaby. Back then, forever meant Sunday morning pancakes, whispered dreams about our future, and long, slow kisses after study sessions. It meant stolen weekends in that little Airbnb outside Tulsa where we pretended we were already living together. It meant promises. Until it didn't. The moment I told him I was pregnant, I swear the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. He didn't yell. He didn't panic. He just leaned back on my couch like I'd just told him we were out of milk. "You're serious?" he asked, voice flat. I nodded. "I've taken 3 tests, and I went to the clinic yesterday to confirm it's real." I waited for him to reach for my hand or ask how I was feeling or say anything that sounded like support. Instead, he exhaled slowly like I'd just dumped a burden on his chest. "Well, that's your problem now." Those 5 words. They rearranged everything inside me. I didn't even cry in front of him. I just stared, blinking like maybe I'd misheard. But I hadn't. He stood, grabbing his keys like we just had an awkward conversation about dinner plans. "I'm not ready to be a dad. I've got law school next year. I can't do this." "You think I can?" I asked, barely above a whisper. His eyes softened for a second, just a flicker, but it wasn't remorse. It was inconvenience. "You'll figure it out. You always do." And then the door closed behind him. Just like that. The boy who once swore he'd name our first daughter Hazel was gone. I never heard from him again. I never even got an "I'm sorry." Now, lying there in Jessica's living room with the distant hum of traffic and the soft sound of her dog snoring under the coffee table, I replayed that final scene again and again, like a film stuck on loop. Not to grieve it, but to remind myself. That was the last time I would ever beg someone to stay. I shifted onto my side, placing a hand on my belly. 2 lives, 2 little girls. My girls, they didn't ask to be here. They didn't break anything. They were the only thing keeping me from unraveling completely. I imagined their faces. I imagined them smiling in the backseat of a car with the windows down, wind in their hair, giggling over something I'd packed them for lunch. I imagined them in little dresses, not store-bought, not hand-me-downs. Something I made, something beautiful. I had no job, no savings, no degree finished. I was sleeping on a couch in a one-bedroom apartment with a friend who already worked 2 jobs herself. But somewhere, buried under the weight of all that loss, a tiny spark flared. The thought whispered through my mind before I could chase it away. You've survived worse. Now build something no one can take from you. Hospitals smell like lemon disinfectant and nerves. That's the first thing I noticed as I leaned against the grimy beige wall of Tulsa General's labor and delivery wing, clutching Jessica's hand like a lifeline. The contractions had come faster than expected, slamming into me like tidal waves while I was still trying to figure out if I had enough diapers packed in my thrifted duffel bag. "You're okay, Em," Jessica whispered as I doubled over, another surge of pain ripping through my spine. "You're safe. Just breathe." "I don't think I can do this," I gasped. Her grip tightened. "You already are." The nurse, Cheryl, I think, rushed us through paperwork, eyeing my state of panic with the calm detachment of someone who'd seen this scene 1,000 times. No judgment, just motion. Clipboard, ID, wristband, gown. The room was small, clean but aged, cracks in the tile, faint scratches on the bed rail, a battered rocking chair in the corner. I barely had time to register it before another contraction stole my breath. Jessica helped me onto the bed, brushing the sweat-soaked hair from my forehead. "You've got this," she said again. "You're stronger than you think." Strong, it didn't feel like strength. It felt like breaking. It felt like everything inside me was tearing open, physically, emotionally, all at once. And then hours blurred into minutes. I remember pushing, I remember screaming, I remember crying. And then I remember the sound, 2 cries, not one. 2 distinct, heart-splitting wails that pierced through the sterile air and sliced me open in a different way. And just like that, the room tilted. Not in pain. In awe, Jessica was crying, I was crying. Even the nurse blinked back something. They laid them on my chest, 2 tiny, warm, squirming bundles who didn't know they'd been born into chaos. They didn't care that we had nothing, that there was no nursery, no father, no plan, they only knew me. And I knew them, Lily, Grace. Their names came out between sobs, like a prayer and a promise all at once. One had a tiny wrinkle between her brows already, like she was deeply concerned with the world. The other's fingers curled around mine the moment I touched her, fierce and unrelenting. "Hi," I whispered. "I'm your mom." Jessica sat beside me, still crying. "You did it, Mama," she said, voice shaking with joy. "You're amazing." I wasn't amazing. I was a mess. But for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt whole. The room was bare. No flowers, no congratulations, just the hum of medical machines and the blanket wrapped tightly around my daughters. And yet it was full of life, full of love, full of everything I had left to fight for. Later, when Jessica stepped out to call her sister and ask about getting a second-hand crib, I held Lily and Grace against my chest and whispered all the things I hadn't dared say out loud. They said I was a shame. They called me selfish. They said I ruined my life. I pressed my lips to the crown of Grace's head. But they were wrong. I didn't know how we'd survive, how I'd pay rent next month, how I'd ever give these girls the life they deserved. But I knew one thing, no one was ever going to call them a mistake. I'd been discarded, rejected, abandoned. But these girls, they were going to be seen, loved, celebrated. I was going to build something from this, out of thread if I had to, out of my bare hands and midnight tears, out of desperation and love and the scraps everyone else threw away. We might not have much, but we had a start. And sometimes that's all you need. 3 weeks after the girls were born, Jessica came home from her overnight shift with 3 things: a bag of powdered donuts, a half-sleeved cardigan from the lost and found, and an idea that would change everything. It started as a joke, really. I was on the floor, surrounded by diapers, wipes, and a mountain of laundry we'd been too tired to fold. Grace was asleep in her bassinet, snoring like a grown man, while Lily was wide awake and fussy. I'd been bouncing her on my hip, singing off-key and hopelessly exhausted when I noticed the curtain fluttering by the kitchen window. It was hideous. Green plaid with tiny faded strawberries, like something salvaged from a 1970s motel. Jessica had joked about replacing it for months, but we hadn't exactly had spare cash for aesthetics. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was postpartum boredom. Maybe it was desperation to feel useful again. But I took that curtain down, pulled out the old Singer sewing machine Jessica's aunt had left in the closet, and got to work. The machine was louder than I remembered. Finicky. Sluggish. But it ran. I hadn't sewn in years, not since junior high home ec, but I let my hands work while Lily gurgled beside me. I snipped, pinned, stitched. Nothing fancy, just instinct. By the time Jessica walked in with her powdered donuts and tired grin, I had something to show her. It was a tiny dress. Imperfect, of course, one sleeve slightly crooked and the hem just a smidge too high on the left, but it was sweet, soft, playful, and made with love. Jessica froze in the doorway. "Did you make that?" I glanced at it, half embarrassed. "Yeah, out of that awful curtain." She stared at it like it was spun from gold. "Emily, it's beautiful." I laughed, half sleep-deprived, half blushing. "It's a baby dress, Jess, not a miracle." "No, listen." She dropped the donut bag on the table and walked over, lifting the tiny garment like it was fragile. "This looks like something from one of those handmade baby boutiques. You could sell these." That's when I laughed again, louder. "Jess, I don't even have a crib. You think I have a business plan?" She shook her head. "You don't need a plan, just an idea, and that," she held up the dress, "is a really, really good one." I sat down hard on the couch, suddenly aware of the ache in my back. It was just something to pass the time. "Well, pass it to the internet," she said, already pulling out her phone. "Let's see what happens." She made me hold the dress up. Then she posed Lily next to it, still in her spit-up stained onesie, and snapped a photo. A few minutes later, she posted it on a local mom's Facebook group under her account with the caption, "Handmade with love by my best friend and single mama superhero. She made this out of an old curtain. Would you buy one?" I rolled my eyes. "You didn't just call me a superhero, did you?" She grinned. "I absolutely did." We forgot about it after that. I went back to bouncing Lily, Jessica nodded off on the armchair, and Grace continued her snoring symphony. But the next morning, something shifted. Jessica's phone buzzed with notification after notification. I was elbow-deep in bottles and burp cloths when she gasped. "Emily, someone bought the dress." I blinked. "What?" She turned her phone toward me. There it was, an order. Someone wanted to Venmo $40 for the curtain dress. But that wasn't all. There were 2 more messages underneath. One mom asked if I could make a size 3T for her toddler. Another asked if I could do a custom baptism gown. I stood frozen in the kitchen, bottle in one hand, a burp rag on my shoulder, and tears welling in my eyes. It wasn't the money. It was the fact that something I made, me, Emily Harris, the girl everyone said ruined her life, was wanted, valued, seen. Jessica was already pulling out a sketchpad from her high school art box. "We should do matching bonnets, maybe little bloomers. Oh, and those baby wrap carriers you see on Etsy." I just stared at her, overwhelmed. "Jess, I can't run a business." "You're not running a business," she said, stepping into the kitchen with that look in her eye, the one she got when she was about to talk me into something life-changing. "You're sharing something real. That's what people want, not perfection, just heart." I sat down slowly at the kitchen table, my fingers tracing the soft edge of the dress. Handmade with love, made from scraps, like me, like us. The idea planted itself in my chest like a seed. Tiny, quiet, but impossible to ignore. Maybe I couldn't fix everything. Not yet, but I could stitch something. A name flickered in the back of my mind. Lily and Grace. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Jessica pacing the kitchen, muttering to herself and tapping furiously on her phone. I blinked against the sunlight streaming through the living room window, the girls still asleep beside me in their double bassinet. My back ached, my ankles were swollen, and my brain still felt like it was running at half speed, but something in her voice cut through the fog. "Emily, you need to get up." I sat up slowly. "Is it the babies?" "No, it's you." She turned the phone toward me, eyes wide with disbelief. "Look." Overnight, her Facebook post had exploded. There were dozens of comments now, mothers, aunts, even a boutique shop owner asking where they could buy the dress if I took custom orders and whether I had a shop. One comment simply read, "This is the kind of craftsmanship people pay for. Don't undersell yourself." I stared at the screen, mouth slightly open. "Is this real?" Jessica nodded, grinning. "You've got 12 order inquiries already, and I found a local mom's consignment group. They'll let us list stuff for free." I ran a hand through my tangled hair. Jess, I don't have fabric or labels or packaging. I made that dress out of a curtain. So, she shrugged, we've got other things. There's a whole stack of unused clothes in the donation box, and the back of my closet is basically a fabric graveyard. She paused. Look, Em, I know this is overwhelming, but people want what you made. And if even one of them follows through, it's gas money, diapers, a pack of formula. That landed. Formula wasn't cheap. And diapers, we were stretching every last coupon already. A single dress could mean 3 days of breathing room. Still, doubt clung to me like a second skin. What if they hate the next one? I whispered. What if the first one was a fluke? Jessica crossed the room and knelt next to me. Then they hate it, and we try again, but you don't stop just because you're scared. You do it scared. That's how you start. I looked down at Lily and Grace, sleeping side by side in their mismatched onesies. They didn't care about Etsy shops or social media buzz. They just needed me to try, and something about that felt bigger than fear. Okay, I said quietly. Let's make another. We spent the rest of the day turning Jessica's living room into a makeshift studio. She cleared off the table, pushed the couch to the side, and unearthed her aunt's forgotten sewing kit from the hall closet. Inside were fabric scraps, old lace, some pink tulle, and a handful of buttons in a cracked mason jar. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. I pieced together a second dress using fabric from one of Jessica's old maxi skirts, soft blue cotton with tiny faded florals. I added a ruffled hem from a vintage pillowcase and hand-stitched the buttons down the back. Every time I made a mistake, I undid it, not because I needed perfection, but because I wanted to feel like I was building something real. While I worked, Jessica sat beside me sketching ideas on napkins and scrap paper. Wraps, headbands, matching mama robes. By sunset, the new dress was finished. Better than the first. Neater. Sweeter. It even had a tiny matching bonnet. Jessica photographed it by the window with Grace curled up beside it. Then she posted it with a caption that made me choke up. Another one-of-a-kind creation from my best friend, who's raising twins on pure grit and talent. Custom sizing available. Support handmade. Support mamas. By the next morning, we had 4 confirmed orders. And a message from someone I didn't know. Is this brand called Lily and Grace? Because if not, it should be. I read it 3 times. That name had lived in my chest for weeks, waiting, whispering, but seeing it written by a stranger, it suddenly felt real. Lily and Grace, I repeated, tasting the words out loud. Jessica grinned. That's your brand. I shook my head, smiling despite myself. That's our brand. Later that night, after the girls were fed and finally asleep, Jessica and I sat on the kitchen floor surrounded by scissors, thread, and scraps of half-cut fabric. She raised a can of store-brand soda. To Lily and Grace. I raised mine too. To figuring it out. We clinked cans, laughed quietly, and sat there in the glow of the oven light, 2 women, a pile of dreams, and a name stitched out of survival. And in that moment, I wasn't just a girl with twins and a broken past. I was a businesswoman in the making. 1 year later, I unlocked the door to our rented studio. Yes, our studio, and was greeted by the soft chaos that had become my new normal. Spools of ribbon lined one wall like candy-colored soldiers. Sketches fluttered on a corkboard above the cutting table. 2 toddler-sized mannequins wore our best-selling spring dresses, one with sunflower print, the other with tiny white daisies stitched along the hem. Jessica stood at the sewing machine, a pencil behind her ear and a coffee cup dangerously close to a pile of buttons. "You're late," she teased, without looking up. "I stopped at the post office," I said, dropping the shipping receipts onto the counter. "All 10 orders are out." She finally glanced up and grinned. 10 in 1 day, can you believe that? No, sometimes I still couldn't. A year ago, we were stitching dresses from curtain panels and clearing space between bottles and bassinet toys. Now we had an actual space. It wasn't fancy, concrete floors, squeaky door, windows that didn't quite seal right, but it was ours. Lily and Grace wasn't just a name anymore. It was a brand, a business, a life. Every tag we printed carried the same line. Handmade with love, born from courage. Because that's what it was. Every stitch held the weight of nights I didn't sleep. Every hem remembered the sound of my daughter's crying, and every ribbon held a little of Jessica's laughter from the nights we worked until midnight. The twins were almost walking now. Lily had started saying "mama" a week ago. Grace, ever the contrarian, preferred mine. Figures. They spent most mornings with a part-time sitter we'd found through a parenting co-op, and afternoons with us at the studio, usually wreaking havoc with crayons and fabric scraps under the big window. It wasn't always pretty. Some days, I still felt like I was balancing on a tightrope with one frayed shoe and a baby on each hip. But we were building something. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't apologizing for it. That morning, Jessica handed me a clipboard. "You've got a phone consultation at noon. Custom christening gown for twin girls in Georgia." I raised an eyebrow. "Did you tell her that twin moms get a discount?" She smirked. "I told her you'd throw in a matching headband. I'm not insane." I laughed and sank into the chair behind the design table, flipping through fabric samples. We'd just gotten a new delivery, soft pastels, embroidered cotton, even a few floral silks donated from a retired dressmaker in town who loved what we were doing. People had started reaching out, donating supplies, cheering us on, sharing photos of their babies in our clothes like we were some boutique label out of New York. But we were still just two women in Tulsa. Two moms, two fighters, one idea, that you could start with scraps and make something lasting. Jessica leaned over the table and poked my arm. "Hey, Earth to Emily, what are you thinking about?" I looked around the studio. The swatches, the patterns, the half-cut dresses. The quiet sound of my daughters babbling in the playpen by the window. "I'm thinking," I said softly, "that I'm not afraid anymore." Jessica smiled. "You shouldn't be, you built this." I nodded. Not just the studio, not just the brand, my life. I built a life. Later that afternoon, as we packed up another stack of orders and I zipped Lily and Grace into matching lilac dresses for their first early learning class, I knelt beside them and smoothed their hair. "These," I whispered, "were made just for you." Lily giggled. Grace stomped in her new shoes like a tiny warrior. As they waddled out the door toward Jessica's car, I stayed back a moment on the porch of the studio, watching the light filter through the glass sign above our entrance. Lily and Grace, hand-stitched, hand-grown, and finally mine. 3 years had passed since the night I was shoved out with a suitcase and a swollen belly. 3 years since I stood on the porch of my parents' home with tears streaking my face and a silence heavier than thunder crashing around me. Now I was back, not with apologies, but with a box in my arms, photo albums, hand-drawn crayon portraits, a flyer from our first fashion expo, and 2 daughters waiting in the car. Jessica had warned me. "Are you sure about this?" she'd asked when I told her I was going to visit my parents. "You don't owe them anything, Em. They made their choice." But this wasn't about owing. It was about showing them what they'd lost. Not out of spite, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of it. It was about dignity. About standing on the very ground where I had once been thrown down and showing them I hadn't just stood back up, I'd risen. So I wore my beige wool coat and carried a box filled with proof. Not to plead, but to offer them a glimpse of the life they had chosen not to be part of. Lily and Grace sat in their car seats, watching quietly as I climbed the porch steps. "Wait here," I said gently. "Mommy's just going to talk." The door hadn't changed. Still dark green, still chipped at the bottom from when my dad used to kick it open with muddy boots. I knocked twice. A long pause. Then the door opened. My mother stood there. Not older exactly, just more brittle. Her mouth pursed the moment she saw me, eyes flicking down to the box in my arms. She didn't say hello. "Just still flaunting your mistakes, I see." The wind caught the edge of my coat, but I didn't flinch. "I'm not here to fight. I just thought you might want to see what your grandchildren look like." Her eyes darted past me to the car. A flicker of something, regret, curiosity, pain, flicked across her face, but then her expression hardened again. "Robert," she called over her shoulder. "It's her." Footsteps echoed down the hallway, heavier than I remembered. Then he appeared, my father. Older too, but with that same look in his eye, the one he gave when I wore makeup too young or asked to go to a friend's party. Disappointment, barely concealed under a mask of discipline. I held up the box, my voice steady. "Their names are Lily and Grace. I thought maybe you'd want to see." He didn't move. Didn't even look at the photos peeking from the top of the box. "We have nothing to say to someone who sold her shame into silk," he said coldly. The words hit harder than I expected. sold her shame into silk. That's what he thought of the dresses, of the work, of the company that paid for our rent, our food, our future. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there for a moment, letting the words settle. And then, without blinking, I placed the box on the porch, carefully, lovingly, like an offering they didn't deserve. "You don't have to say anything," I said quietly. "But someday they'll ask about you, and I'll tell them the truth, that you had a chance to be part of their lives, and chose not to." My mother's arms crossed tighter. "Don't make this dramatic, Emily." I looked her dead in the eye. "Dramatic was dragging my suitcase down the hallway while I begged you not to turn your back on me." That silenced her. I turned and walked down the steps, one hand gripping the railing, the other steadying myself against the cold. When I reached the car, I looked back once. They were still standing there. My mother stared at the box. My father didn't. I climbed into the driver's seat and shut the door. "Did they say hi?" Lily asked from the back. I turned and smiled at her, soft and sad and full of something deeper than pain. "No, baby, but we did." Grace clapped her hands, oblivious, and Jessica handed me a warm drink from the passenger seat. "You okay?" she asked quietly. I exhaled. "Yeah, I think I needed to see it, that it's still the same, that they didn't change." Jessica nodded. "Sometimes the closure isn't the door opening. It's knowing you were right to walk away." As we drove off, the box stayed on the porch, unopened, unwanted, but I didn't leave empty-handed. I left knowing who I was now, and more importantly, who I was never going to be again. The morning was warm and quiet, the kind of early September hush that feels like a held breath. I stood in the doorway of our home. Yes, our home now, a 2-bedroom rental with creaky floors and sun-soaked windows. Watching Lily and Grace spin around in the entryway, giggling and chasing the cats. They were 5 now. 5. I'd blinked and somehow the months had folded into years. And today was their very first day of school. I had laid out the dresses the night before, carefully ironed and folded. Matching lilac cotton with white piping, delicate pleats across the chest, and 2 hand-stitched initials, L and G, on the hem. I'd sewn them last week during one of those late-night stretches when the world is quiet and you remember who you are. They weren't just dresses. They were proof. Proof of every decision I made when I had nothing but a couch and a crying newborn. Proof that what came out of me, after all the rejection, the fear, the shame, was something worth wearing, something beautiful. Grace climbed onto the stool first. "Mama, do the back," she chirped, holding her arms out like a little ballerina. I smiled and zipped her up slowly, smoothing the shoulders. "Do I look like a student?" she asked, turning to face me, her brown eyes big with excitement. "You look like someone about to change the world," I said softly. Lily was next. She was quieter than Grace, always observing, always a step behind, but never out of step. She climbed up, twisting the fabric in her fingers. "You okay, Bug?" She nodded slowly. "Are you coming with us?" I kissed the top of her head. "I'll walk you in, then you get to be brave all on your own." Her small fingers tightened around mine. "What if they don't like my dress?" I knelt in front of her, holding her gaze. "Then they're missing out because this dress, it's magic. Real magic. Real magic," I whispered. "Woven from love and midnight and a mom who never gave up." Jessica arrived 10 minutes later, her hair thrown in a messy bun, carrying little backpacks with their names embroidered in glitter thread. She'd stayed the night before, helping me pack lunches and label glue sticks. When I opened the front door, the sunlight poured in, and for a split second I saw it. The full circle, me standing on a porch again. But this time not holding a suitcase. This time I was watching my daughters walk into the world. On their own. The school was only a few blocks away, but we took our time. Lily insisted on holding both mine and Jessica's hands. Grace ran ahead, already greeting kids she hadn't even met yet. The sidewalk felt steadier beneath my feet than it ever had before. A few other parents lingered at the gate, nervously adjusting hair bows or handing out last-minute granola bars. I spotted one mom eyeing the girls' dresses, then leaning over to whisper something to the woman beside her. She looked again and smiled. "Did you make those?" I nodded, almost sheepish. "Yeah, from my line, Lily and Grace." Her eyebrows lifted. "I've heard of you." Jessica nudged me gently with her elbow. "You're a Tulsa legend now, Em. Get used to it." We waited by the classroom door until the teacher came out, Ms. Raymond, young and kind-eyed, with a clipboard and a soothing voice. The girls walked inside hand in hand, backpacks bouncing. They didn't look back, and I didn't call out, because they didn't need me to hold their hand anymore. They just needed to know I was watching, and I was. Back at the studio, I unlocked the door, flipped the sign to open, and let the quiet settle. There was work to do, orders to prep, emails to answer, a new fall pattern I was behind on. But for one breath, one moment, I sat on the stool near the window and let myself feel it. The pride, the peace, the promise kept. Years ago, I'd said I wouldn't let them be a mistake, and today they walked into school wearing dresses made from the courage of that vow. The package was cream-colored. Thick paper, hand-addressed, no return label, just my name in careful script and our street address written like the sender had to look it up. It arrived on Christmas Eve. Jessica and I were in the studio, putting final touches on a donation batch of winter coats for the local shelter. The girls were building pillow forts in the back office, wrapped in fleece scraps and covered in glitter glue. Holiday music played low in the background, and the heater rattled like it always did in December. I didn't notice the envelope at first. Jessica brought it in with a bundle of invoices from the mailbox. She set it on my work table, right between a spool of silver thread and a steaming mug of peppermint tea. "Looks personal," she said, raising an eyebrow. I reached for it absently, flipping it over. The handwriting stopped me cold. I hadn't seen it in years, but I knew it instantly. My mother's loops, my father's slant. Their handwriting always tangled into each other when they signed cards, old habits. I stared at the envelope for a full minute before I spoke. "It's from them." Jessica turned away from the sewing machine. "Seriously," I nodded. She walked over, drying her hands on a piece of muslin. "Do you want to open it?" I didn't answer. I wasn't sure. We'd just gotten through our morning deliveries. The girls were happy. The shop was decorated with snowflake cutouts Lily had made. Everything felt warm and full and peaceful. This letter felt like a match dropped near kindling. Still, I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of heavy stationery. "Emily, we know we don't have the right to ask anything of you, but we saw the article in the local paper. The photo of Lily and Grace. Your company, your story. We were wrong. If you're willing, we'd like to see you, see them. Maybe start over. We'll be home on Christmas Eve. The door will be open. No names, no love, Mom and Dad. Just a signature scrawl at the bottom, almost unsure of itself. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and set it down. Jessica leaned against the table, watching me like she always did when she was worried I was about to walk barefoot across emotional glass. "You don't have to go," she said quietly. "I know." She waited. I traced the edge of the envelope with my fingertip. "But I want them to see." Jessica's voice was hesitant. "See what?" I met her eyes. "Who we've become without them." That night, I dressed Lily and Grace in their holiday coats, deep burgundy velvet with pearl buttons and cream collars. I designed them special for the season and saved 2 in their sizes. They looked like tiny queens. I wore white, a winter coat I'd made with leftover brocade fabric. It wasn't flashy, but it was clean, structured, unapologetically strong. Jessica stood in the doorway as we left, holding her thermos and watching us with narrowed eyes. "Something feels off," she said. "I'm not going there for forgiveness," I told her. "I just want them to know I didn't disappear, I thrived." She nodded slowly, then pulled me into a hug. "Then go remind them." Their house hadn't changed. Still the same faded shutters, same porch light hanging crooked over the front step. Except now, every window glowed with Christmas lights. The ones my dad used to complain were too much effort every December. I stepped out of the car with my daughters at my sides, one hand in each of mine. Their little boots crunched softly on the frost-covered path as we walked toward the door. Inside, I heard voices. Laughter, the clink of silverware. A family gathering. I knocked once. No answer. Then I remembered the door will be open. I turned the handle and stepped inside. Conversation stopped. The warmth of the house hit me first, then the silence. All eyes turned to us. I saw cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, an aunt near the fireplace, a few people I didn't even recognize, and then my mother. She was standing near the table, hands clasped in front of her. Her eyes filled instantly with tears when she saw me. And my father, his fork paused halfway to his mouth, frozen mid-bite. No one moved until I spoke. "Meet your grandchildren." I gestured gently toward Lily and Grace, who stood tall in their coats, wide-eyed but calm. My mother stepped forward, her voice cracking. "We didn't know, we didn't think." Her words collapsed into sobs. I held her gaze, heart steady. "You don't get to pick when to be proud," I said. "We made it without you." I turned, gathered my daughters close, and walked out. Not angry, not broken, just done. 3 days later, I stood backstage at the Tulsa Children's Fashion Expo, heart hammering harder than it had the day I gave birth. I adjusted the pin holding my hair back and looked down at the tags stitched into the back of the tiny winter coat in my hands. Lily and Grace, born from courage. The lights on the runway glowed through the side curtain. Music pulsed beneath the chatter of the crowd. Somewhere out front, local buyers, stylists, and boutique owners flipped through our lookbooks, sipping complimentary cider and circling styles they liked. And behind me, Jessica, whispering the lineup to our little models as they prepared to walk in our holiday line. She wore a headset and a clipboard like she'd been born for show business. Grace peeked out from behind a rack of coats and grinned. "Mama, I go now?" "Almost," I smiled. "You'll hear the music change. Then you and Lily go together just like we practiced." She nodded solemnly, then giggled and twirled in place. Jessica handed me a card. "You ready for your walk?" I glanced down. The final segment, me, the designer, the moment we'd worked toward. I wasn't sure if I was ready. Until I saw Lily reach for Grace's hand, steady and sure. Then I was. When my name was announced, I stepped onto the runway, coat fluttering behind me, heels clicking softly against the white flooring. The crowd clapped and cameras flashed, but it was the banner above the stage that caught in my throat. Lily and Grace, born from courage. I walked with my head high, not for applause, not even for the buyers, but for every night I'd stayed up sewing while my babies cried. For every person who said I'd ruined my life. For every woman who ever thought she had to choose between motherhood and ambition. We made this, and we were just getting started. 10 years later, I stood behind the velvet curtain of a Paris runway show, watching as my daughters walked into the light. Lily, graceful and steady, wore a soft wool coat in icy lavender, her curls pinned back in a crown braid. Grace, bold and beaming, twirled down the catwalk in a deep plum-wrap dress with gold embroidery that shimmered under the spotlights. The crowd applauded. They didn't know the story behind the stitches, but I did. I always would. Backstage, it smelled like hairspray, perfume, and nerves. Models floated past in silk and velvet, photographers barked instructions, and someone was shouting in French about a late accessory change. But I wasn't flustered. Not anymore. This wasn't a dream I'd stumbled into. It was a life I'd built, one night at a time, out of heartbreak and thread. "Emily Harris," a voice asked behind me. I turned. A young designer, maybe 21, nerves bouncing in her hands, stood holding a notepad. "Do you mind if I ask, what's your story? Like how you started?" I smiled softly. I'd been asked that before, in magazine interviews, on podcasts, in casual conversations at expos. But the way she asked it felt different, personal, like she needed to hear it. I glanced at the stage where Lily and Grace were taking their final bow under the soft glow of the Paris lights, and then I answered. I got kicked out for being pregnant. With twins, I had nothing. Not a dollar, not a plan. Just a friend who believed in me and a sewing machine that barely worked. Her eyes widened. "And now," I smiled again, this time with all the quiet power of a woman who remembers every door that closed on her. "Now I run a brand named after the very people they told me would ruin my life." She let out a soft laugh. "That's amazing." I shook my head gently. "It's survival, turned into beauty." She scribbled something on her notepad, then looked up again. "What would you tell someone starting from nothing?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Start anyway." Later that night, in our hotel room overlooking the Seine, I sat on the balcony, sipping tea while the girls, now teenagers in glitter masks and matching slippers, debriefed the show behind me. "Did you see that editor's face when I told her I sewed the hem myself?" Grace cackled. "She was practically shaking," Lily added. "Wait until she finds out we designed the spring concept, too." I turned back to look at them. My daughters, the reason I started, the reason I kept going. The reason I never once considered giving up, even when the world told me I should. "Hey," I said quietly. Come here a second. They joined me on the balcony, curling up beside me like they did when they were little. I looked at them bright, bold, so full of their own ideas now, and I realized something. This wasn't just a comeback story anymore. It was a beginning. Do you know what I used to whisper to you both when you were babies? I asked. They shook their heads. I reached over, brushing Lily's cheek, then tucked a strand of hair behind Grace's ear. I used to say, we're going to make something beautiful even from this. Grace leaned against my shoulder. We did, Lily nodded. You did, I exhaled and smiled. If this story touched your heart, share it. Let someone know they're not alone. And tell me in the comments, what have you made from your own heartbreak? Thank you for walking this journey with me. Until the next story.